Good morning to the small handful of people that were ever listening to these and to whom I have provided nothing for at least a month, it feels like. Probably is, at least. Either way, I am still alive, but I wanted to use my own particular circumstance. I won't go quite so far as to say failure, but I'll say circumstance, to demonstrate a phenomenon that I think a lot of people are struggling with right now, trying to figure out where they lie on priority and importance. And it's on the topic of the relationship between a thing and the truths about that thing, whether it's a concept, a doctrine, a situation of life, whatever the thing is, there's both objective and subjective truths about it. About a year ago, or a little over a year ago, actually, now that I think about it, I had run across the channel on YouTube that was very interesting to me. And I was interested because there was a discussion of truths that I myself hadn't heard before. And so I was like, oh, this is exciting, I get to learn something new. And so I listened and I learned. And I did not presume to judge what I was listening to. I did not make critical assessments. I just said, "Oh, let's just look at what this is and enjoy it for what it is." Not coming into it with the idea that, oh, I'm going to find something to disagree with or something to create contention about. It's just, hey, here's something new. Here's something interesting. So sit down, shut up, listen, hear what has to be said, and try to demonstrate over time understanding to not just parrot, because even parrots, obviously, given that they're associated with that phenomenon, not just to repeat the sound bites, but to genuinely understand what was being said. And over time, what I discovered, though, is not that what I would be critical of is the content itself, the things that were talked about, because they were true. The problem isn't whether or not they were true. The problem is whether they were objectively true or subjectively true. And what I mean by that is that things which are objectively true are true universally. Things which are subjectively true are not true universally. There are conditions. There are times when that truth is not there. It's not attached. There's not a relationship between the truth and the thing. So to give an example, the number 4 has a certain quantity that is associated with that label. So we have a symbol for the number 4, and attached to that symbol is objectively a quantity that symbol represents. 1, 2, 3, 4 things. That is objective truth about the number 4. Subjectively is when I have 4 of a particular thing. So let's say on my desk right now, I have 4 valve stems. These are the things that on the rim of your car, there's 4 rims, generally speaking, and they're metal. And into a hole, there is a valve stem inserted so that when they put the tire over the rim, they have a way to get air in and out. So I have 4 of them on my desk. So right now there is a relationship between the number 4 and the amount of valve stems I have on my desk. But if I lose one of those valve stems, I haven't changed 4. I haven't actually changed the objective truth about what number 4 is. I've simply broken the subjective relationship between the number 4 and how many valve stems I've got. The relationship is no longer there. And so I now have a different relationship. I have a different association between the number of things I've got and the truth about the number of things I've got. And the reason why I want to use that sort of simplistic explanation as the start is because it can get very convoluted. So about myself, I have a certain height. That is objectively true. But the time that I spend making YouTube videos or participating in Discords or calling my mom on the phone, those things are conditional. Those things are not objectively true about me. I can break that relationship. I can make mistakes. I can change the nature of that relationship through my actions. So when I called my mom for Mother's Day, she hadn't been able to open up the card that I sent. So it's objectively true that I sent a card, but from a subjectively true standpoint, it didn't technically matter at that point whether I had or not because she wasn't able to read it. And so when I had talked to her on the phone at that moment, she appreciated the effort and all that kind of stuff, and she appreciated the call, but it was a subjective relationship that yet hadn't been made between her and the actual card that I sent and the words that I wrote in the card, that kind of a thing. Likewise, if I don't make the time to interact with folks through digital tools, because what has happened is that the objective truth about the requirements of my family means that, like so for example, my youngest is crawling, and one of my other kids is now going through potty training. I've also been preaching more often, and things at work have been much busier than they have in the past. And so all of a sudden, my ability to maintain that relationship through creating YouTube videos, through participating in, like things like Discord or other social media tools, all of a sudden my relationship is shaky at best. It's gone in many cases, and while I would resent that, it's not because I just stopped doing anything, but it's because the things that I couldn't do anything about asserted themselves. I no longer had the freedom, the budget, so to speak, to be able to invest in subjective truths in my life. I need to be here to support my family in specific things. One of the other things that we had happen was that we had some trees felled. They were tall, and so I've had to buck the trees and split them, and it takes a lot of time and energy, and I need to do that. Like, I need to get that wood out of my front yard because there's reasons. It's like that's not something I get to choose. And so similar to the relationship with the number 4, it's objectively it's objectively true that there are responsibilities I have that I can't just ignore. It's subjectively true that there are relationships that I have cherished and enjoyed that I can continue to maintain. Now, what's amusing about this is that, again, the digital relationships that I had were all through various tools. But the real life relationships that I had with people at the church that we attend and that I preach at from time to time, I wasn't really investing in those. And while I, as an individual, can invest time in digital tools and whatnot, my whole family can't do that simultaneously with me. In many ways, it's not safe, for me to have my children exposed to the internet, to have my wife exposed to the internet, to not have a barrier between them and the potential people that are out there. Because there's millions and billions of people, and if even a small portion of them have bad intent, then it is in my best interest to ensure that I'm serve as a barrier there. And this isn't to say that those in physical presence can't also be bad actors, but the quantity of people that I can interact with in meat space is considerably fewer than those that I can interact with on the internet. And the consequences of relationships take on a different sort of tone as well, I guess. in that if I piss somebody off on the internet, the kinds of consequences which can come from that are completely different than if they're a neighbor, a literal neighbor of mine. The scope of impact, the degree to which damage can be done, and the consequences in the here and now are completely different when it's on the internet versus somebody that I can see in flesh and blood. And so kind of getting back to this objective versus subjective thing, what I had found on that particular YouTube channel is that there was a lot of time spent on the subjective and not a lot on the objective. And so while I learned a lot about this particular person, or at least to the degree that they were earnest about their presentations, about what they saw, about what they experienced, about what they understood, I got to understand them, but I didn't really get to understand how it would apply to me, which is selfish, certainly. It is not a very endearing admission to make, but it is just about them. It wasn't really about me. And as I would try to apply some of the truths, what I found was that, again, they were not universally applicable. Things that were true for this person weren't necessarily true for me. And it was discouraging, honestly. It was discouraging because what it meant is that all I was really learning was what was subjectively true for that person. What were the conditionals? I wasn't really learning universal or objective truths, things that I could apply to my own life or that through relationship I could apply to other people's lives. I wasn't learning something that would be useful, that would be relevant, that would be true beyond this particular person's life and experience. And it wasn't 100%, but it was enough. There was enough of the content being presented that was subjectively true that eventually it just got to the point where there wasn't motivation or need to continue learning. There wasn't something to dig up that I could do something with, that could be useful, that would be illuminating, that would be educating. And so there's this relationship. There's this relationship between what is objectively true and what is subjectively true. And in the case of that channel, I don't watch anymore. I don't listen anymore. I don't participate. I don't interfere with the dynamic that's going on there because, again, it's not my job to point out when in that particular channel, especially when all that's being discussed is subjective truth. If that's what people are wanting to do and participate in, then let them have it. It's like that's what they want to do. That is what they're getting value out of. And so for me to interfere with that would be worse, I think, even than what I'm doing now. Now what I'm trying to do is just detach, just to say, all right, I'm just leave it alone, not engage, not insert myself into a place where I am not wanted to be, where the dynamic that I'm looking for doesn't exist. It's not my job to change what is subjectively true about that channel. And it doesn't matter which one it is. Some of you will know, but because this is a video that is not, selective, there's going to be random people that may come across this and have no idea, and that's okay. The goal that I would like to set, the refining factor, the filter, is that I want to find objective truth. And that's really hard to do in this period of time because what we're seeing is, again, across the board, people can't afford to sustain the relationship between the subjective truths and the things that they value most. What we're seeing is that over time, through debt, through psychological manipulation, through various means, not all of them necessarily bad, but just that we have afforded ourselves relationships with our identity. So we're going to swap the thing with identity. Our identities have had objective and subjective truths about them. And we've had so many subjective truths, and we've grown so accustomed to those truths that when we can no longer afford to hold on to them, it feels like a piece of us is being chunked off, sheared away. What's objectively true hasn't changed this whole time, but because what we have included in our identity is changing, it feels like who we are is changing. Reality is we're being refined. There's a video I did a while back where it's like we're in a time of refinement. And I think what that means is that the things that we've held a relationship on between two things, our identity, for example, our identity and reality and all that kind of stuff. The things that we've attached to our identity that were subjective are being trimmed off. They're being pared away. We're no longer able to keep them associated with one another, and we're being refined back to just the objective truths. What's universally true about who I am in every setting. One example of how this showed up is that I got a friend of mine who moved to a new state and who started a new job, and he's been struggling because he does not want to have a compartmentalized personality where from one circumstance to the next, who he is changes. He wants to have certain priorities and values that he places on his time, on the way that he does things. And he doesn't want it to change just because he shows up at work. And it's causing conflict because the values and the priorities that he has in his private life, the things that we would say are more objective than not, at least, the things that he values and uses to prioritize the quality of the work that he does, and all that kind of a thing. It's in disagreement with the way that the rest of the world is currently operating. And so he puts himself at risk when he is true to himself, so to speak. So the question then is, well, does he just need a new job? Is there a problem with being, just objectively true? Or do we need to put on these subjective truths in order to make stuff work? And if these subjective truths are reprehensible, if they're offensive, all that kind of stuff. An example might be, is it objectively true that I have a face? At this point in time, at least. So to this point in my life, it has been objectively true that I have a face. Whether I wear a mask or not, though, is subjectively true. There's conditions. Sometimes I'm wearing one because I just don't want to bother with people yelling at me, and sometimes I'm not wearing one at all, like right now when I'm talking into this microphone. That's a subjective truth, and it's one that's been forced upon me, but it hasn't changed who I am, or at least it shouldn't have changed who I am. And that's I think where we're teasing out, each of us at an individual level and yet at the same time at the societal level, what things are objectively true? What is really persistent about who we are, or what we value, or what we're doing, or how we interact with reality? What's true? And what people are really saying is what's objectively true. Because again, we can find subjective truth all over the place. We can find things that are subjectively true wherever we look. It's not difficult to find subjective truth, but objective truth, though. The things that are true regardless of how we feel about them. The things that are true regardless of condition. Like the number 4. The number 4 doesn't change even if there are horrendous things associated with it, or if there are good things associated with it. Those things don't alter what 4 is. They just change what is subjectively related to it from one moment to the next. And so this morning I chose to, at least for the sake of this conversation, monologue, it's not a conversation, I'm not talking to anybody, I am making it subjectively true again that I make YouTube videos. I talk into a microphone, I record the audio, I throw a picture on top, and then I upload it to YouTube. That's something which hasn't been subjectively true about me for, like I said, at least a month is what it feels like. I forgot to look at the dates. I'm doing at least that much. I might try and get online some of the other tools as time permits, as time allows. But if nothing else, what I wanted to try and do is record this to give others an idea of, or to perhaps comfort them in the fact that we're all struggling with really big stuff. This association of truth, this relationship, is an important one to grasp and understand, because a lot of what we're trying to figure out right now, who are we as a country? Who are we as individuals? We look at the potential for government oppression. We say, well, am I the type to be rebellious? Am I the type that's going to be able to resist the government? Or am I going to be something else? Who am I when everything seems to have been exposed as subjective? When I have attached to my identity so many things that I can't sustain any longer? Is who I am really changing, or am I just becoming more of what I should have been all along? I don't know where others folks are at. So certainly grains of salt for the projection involved in presuming anybody else needs to hear or wants to hear something like this. But if you're struggling with identity, if you're struggling with priority, if you're struggling with what is it that I'm supposed to be doing next, or what is it I'm supposed to be doing now, perhaps think about this. Think about what is objectively true and what is subjectively true. What is something that is universal and what is something that is conditional? What is something that you should be doing regardless of what is going on around you, and what are things that you shouldn't be doing regardless of, it's like, try that as an angle on understanding and sorting through what it is you're going through. For me, the most objective truth that I can cling to is that Jesus Christ loved and died for me so that I could be forgiven of my sins. That is something that is objectively true. It is not going to change regardless of how I feel about that. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, so that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. What we're told through the gospel is that there are objective truths that we can cling to. And not only that, but that there is hope in such a truth. All is not lost. Even if things are going to hell in a handbasket around us in the temporal realm, on an eternal timeline, things are going to be okay. It's not the end of all worlds. Perhaps it's just the end of this one. Starting from something like that, paring down to only the things that are universally true, only the things that I can't change. That's what helps. And maybe it would be helpful for you. Maybe that would be something that helps to ground you by no longer entertaining the distractions, by no longer trying to sustain relationships between things, people, tools, services, activities, whatever it is. Maybe your budget's cut, like mine was, and you have to make new choices on how you live in this life. And if you do that, start with Christ, and then work your way out from there. You will not be led astray when, in all of your ways, you acknowledge him as Lord and Savior. If God was willing to die so that we could be reconciled, the Bible tells us, it's like, if we have such great hope in just that, how much greater is the hope that we have for what will come of the relationship that we have been restored to with God in the first place. It's great news enough that our debts have been paid, and all we have to do is put our faith in Christ. That alone is worthy of praise. But we're not just promised that, though. There's a relationship. There is sanctification, which comes after justification. Once we have been made right with God, the process doesn't just stop there, it continues. And as it continues, we grow in ways that are not just dependent on our circumstances. I think we pick up things that are subjective, but the terms for those, the conditions, are so much better grounded. They're rooted in the truth of God, which is unchangeable, instead of this reality that we live in, this world that we live in. The fruit that we have will grow, it will fall, it'll decay, it'll become nutrients, feed the tree again, produce new fruit, etc. But the vine that we are attached to, that we're grafted into through our faith, through our belief in what Christ has done for us. Romans 10:9 says, if we confess our mouths that Jesus is Lord and believe in our heart that he was raised from the dead, then we shall be saved. Even if we are ultimately just a collection of subjective truths, we're being grafted into the ultimate objective truth, the one who is capable of guiding us, shaping us in a way that we can't understand, to guide us towards the best that we can be, to the life that we should have been living already, to become what God intended for us. And that's why you can't be led astray by Christ. Life won't be easy by any means. This world is still at war, even if the end has already been prophesied. It's already seen that the conflict does not end in Satan's favor. He loses and has already lost the biggest battle that could have ever been fought. But in the heart of rebellion, there is no end until behaviors are forced, behaviors are stopped. The rebellion is so deep that until placed apart from the remainder of creation forever, there will be no end to the struggle and strife. There will be no point at which that pride has finally been let go of, and the humility takes over, and confession of sins, repentance can occur. So even though we don't see the complete fulfillment of all that God has promised yet, we don't see the objective truths complete, we can trust in Jesus Christ. We can know that whatever is taken away from us in this life, by the world, by our circumstances, or by us in trying to rebalance the budget for our life, the places that we can spend our time and energy. Start with Christ. Start with Him. Give Him the first say in everything. And then see what comes from that relationship. See what subjective truths He adds or removes from your life. And rest in His judgment in that respect. Ask questions. Don't just be passive about it either. Pray. Study the Scriptures. Understand that the direction He's going to take you has already been described to us. We already know that general trajectory. We already know what the end would look like. We just don't know how to get there. And that's where we have trust. We have faith. Surrender all of your truths to Christ. Let Him be the truth you cling to. And then no matter what happens, no matter what relationships grow or dissipate, show up or disappear, no matter what the subjectives become, you're going to be okay. You're going to be grounded in the rock. You're going to be grounded in the objective truth, and perhaps the only objective truth that we can really rely on. The only one that is worthy of our hope, our praise, our glory, our worship. Give it to Christ. Thank you for your time.